by and large, the series has two good things about it. One is the story, and the second one is Nana Mizuki is in it. Hello everyone, welcome to the Weeb Initiative. I'm your host, the Weeb. This is a show where every other week I'll be talking about anime, manga, and everything in between. This week, following our idol theme, I'll be talking about White Album. So before I start, some disclaimers. First one, spoiler alerts, even though I would try not to talk much about the story itself, I want to touch on some stuff that may or may not maybe give some hints to what happens and some other stuff, but by and large I will not talk much about the story. And second thing, this is a review only about White Album, the anime, the 2 seasons of the anime. I will not be talking about the visual novel nor the manga nor the light novel I think they had, because I did not play the visual novel. Even though it's available on Steam worldwide, I choose not to because I think that the anime, for the things I do here in the show at this time, is better and generally is better received and easier to get into rather than a visual novel. That being said, let's start with the stats. So White Album was originally an eroge developed by Leaf and published by Leaf back in 1998. It's an eroge visual novel. It was released originally for original Windows. I don't know which version of Windows, but you can kind of guess from the year. Then there was a remake done for the PS3 back in 2010, and a whole new remake released first in Japan in 2012 and worldwide in 2023 for new Windows. So they basically remade not only visuals but aspect ratio is also a thing, and from what I can gather, other little things such as voice acting and probably the insert songs they have were also remade for this re-release back in 2012-2023. That being said, it is available on Steam. I think it is like $15. I may be wrong on that, but I think that's it. And I have to also say at this point that there is White Album 2, which is a sequel. At this point I still have not watched the anime adaptation, but the visual novel is out. It's not out in worldwide like this one, so it's Japan only. So I guess we have to wait for the next visual novel. I don't know at this point. And then there was the manga adaptation written by Leaf, published in SCI Media by SCI Media Works in Dengeki Daio from June 2008 to 2010. The article here doesn't actually add the month, but 2 years with 3 volumes, you can kind of get it. And then the anime series made by the studio 7 Arcs, who also did most prominently, I think, Mahou Shoujo Lyrical Nanoha and the 27 anime. I don't actually have many of the things that 7 Arcs has done through the years, but they are a big studio. They are composed by ex-Piero staff, so they are pretty experienced in that regard. The original run for the anime was, the first season was from January 2009 to I think April 2009, and then from October 2009 to December 2009 for the second season. It has in total 26 episodes, and basically it's one big thing. Just, let's say, they did the 2 cores kind of stuff that we do nowadays, but back then they didn't actually call it 2 cores, but it's the same thing. The story is a continuous one throughout the 26 episodes, and there's no, let's say, definitive end for the first season and then the start of the second season. There's kind of one, but not really. The thing is, right, so those are the stats. In summary, we have an eroge, that is the basis of everything that has a manga and an anime series later. Saying that it is an eroge, I have not played it, but I can say that from the anime at the very least, it does not sport any kind of ecchi whatsoever. Any indication that something naughty might have happened, something beyond, let's say, a kiss, they really just imply and not show anything, which may be good, maybe bad, that depends on the way you see it. That being said, let's start with the story. So White Album is a pretty, let's say, kind of simple premise at first. So we have our main protagonist, Fuji Toya, who is this graduate student, so he's in university. They never actually talk about which course they are really specializing in, so I don't actually know, but he is a college student and he is dating this one girl he met in high school called Yuki, and Yuki is prominent, let's say, a prospective, more or less, idol. So she is in the process of becoming a big idol. She's working with an idol agency after graduating from high school, and in that manner, Toya is in college and dating her, even though their schedules do not align for the most part, really at all. You see this throughout the anime, that one of the main themes of the whole thing is that they live in two different worlds, more or less, and their schedule is really not great, let's say. That being said, Toya also has in his circle most of his high school friends still in the same college. So we have, and these guys all become important to the plot one way or another. We have two characters that are introduced later. Most of the supporting characters are introduced early, but there are two specific ones that are introduced a bit later, which also get the story rolling, let's say. So we have our group of high school friends. We have in the same, let's say, age bracket as Toya. We have Haruka, who's more of this younger sister character for the most part. She starts off really depending on Toya for the most part, and she has this connection of seeing him as an older brother, more or less. Later on it develops into something else, but for this first part she is somewhat of the younger sister, not really little sister, but the little sister character appears a bit later, maybe episode 3, I think, episode 4, but we get there when we get there. Then we have Akira. Akira is the second, let's say, male character that really has a place in the story. He is majorly in the anime at the release a minor character. He's basically really different from Toya in terms of interests and hobbies and so on and so forth. But for the most part, they are friends, even though the relationship doesn't actually work that well for the most part. Then we have Misaki. Misaki is their upperclassman, so their senpai. She is, I think, 1 or 2 years older than them, and for the most part she helps out most people. She's really kind and so on and so forth. The thing about this whole anime, and the first episode specifically, the first and second episode really, they are really front loaded. So there is a whole lot of context that they throw around in the first episode. It's a lot of stuff that you need to remember, because the whole thing kind of gets really messed up towards the back end of the anime, because there is this whole thing about they all know each other from high school, but then there is this one little hint that actually Toya doesn't actually remember their original meeting, and this really only just comes to a head at the end of the second season. I will not explain much about it, but still, then there is this whole thing where we have these different connections from the girls with Toya, but then there is this whole question from the get-go that he's dating Yuki, who is basically an idol and basically is the most, let's say, busy of them all. She can't really stick to a single schedule. She has always to work rather than do anything else. And from this point on, there is this one recurring question that comes to the audience. They never really actually say it, but it comes to the audience like, is this really the relationship that you wish for? You can't really see your girlfriend for the most part, and you're still dating her even though you have all these girls around you, and so on and so forth. This is the one question that permeates throughout the whole series. It is a difficult thing to actually address, and this is the main question that comes up for the most part, and what will fuel the conflicts that happen in this whole anime. Now, talking about this in this way, I have to actually give a little bit of tangent. This anime does not really conform to what I was looking for when I set out to talk about idols this year, because for the most part, this is not an idol anime. This is a drama anime with idol theming. So we have themes around idols. We see Yuki as this upcoming newcomer to the industry, and the whole host of different conflicts and troubles, problems and obstacles that she will face. And then we have the introduction of our, I will not say she's the main girl because she shares the spotlight with Yuki for the most part, but to me she's best girl in the series in a major way, let's say. I will talk more about this when I get to my opinion, but we get the introduction of the most important character in this series, the one voiced by Nana Mizuki, Ogatarina, who is this kind of top idol of this one production company called Ogata Productions, so basically Ogatarina is the idol, and her brother Ogata Eiji is the director of this production company, and so he's the musician who composes all her songs, and she's the singer. She is voiced by Nana Mizuki, and Nana Mizuki actually sings her own songs. That being said, I have to say Yuki, voiced by Hirano Aya, also does her own songs. So each of the artists that does the character actually sings their own songs. And now I have to give, talking about songs, I have to give the tangent, take a bit of time to actually talk about how much how stacked this voice cast is. This was one of the main things we talked about when we started watching this in the Discord. It was unimaginable how stacked is this. Like, so first off, right, this is 2009, and many of the guys here won't actually have their heyday or the reference that I'm using here some years later. So much so that specifically for Nana Mizuki, when I heard her song, that was Nana Mizuki. I can vouch for that. I'm getting ahead of myself. For those who don't know, Nana Mizuki is Tsubasa from Symphony Gear. If you know me, you know my channel, you know that I hecking love Symphony Gear. Oh my god, I will die on this hill, but Symphony Gear was one of the best things I ever watched, and one of the shining stars, one of the 7 shining stars, 8 maybe, shining stars of Symphony Gear was Nana Mizuki as Tsubasa, and so I have this special place in my heart where I say that Nana Mizuki in this series, she's best girl. That being said, my biases aside, so Nana Mizuki was Tsubasa in Symphony Gear, let's say 6 years later, because I think Symphony Gear started in 2015. But that being said, the voice doesn't actually match the Nana Mizuki that I remember from Symphony Gear. That is to say, her range of voice work is pretty nice, which again, great, that's great. And then not only her, but for example, as I already stated, Yuki, voiced by Hirano Aya, is both Haruhi from the anime of the somewhat same name, and Lucy from Fairy Tail. Toya is done by Maeno Tomoaki, who has done Pain in Naruto. Yayoi, who's Yuki's manager, who I will talk more about a bit later, is voiced by Park Uromi, who did the Japanese voice for Edward Elric from Fullmetal Alchemist, both Fullmetal Alchemist, the original one, and Brotherhood, and the whole host of specials. We have Mana, who I will talk more about later, done by Tomatsu Haruka, who is 02, and Yuki Asuna from SAO. We have Akira, done by Sakaguchi Daisuke, who's Ace in One Piece. And Misaki is done by Takamoto Megumi, who is Winry, also from Fullmetal Alchemist. So this voice cast is fucking stacked, all things considered. We were really surprised when we look it up, because the aggregates, and so just more on this whole thing. For the most part, I use my anime list to see how people, let's say, feel about an anime that I'm looking for. And when I saw the original score for this whole mess, and I saw that it was from 2009, my expectations were really low. So 2009, so it sold, and the aggregate score for the first season is 6.4 at the time of writing. In the second season, I think it's 6 point something, which is really low. So my expectations were really, really low to conform to it. Then we started to actually watch it, and as time passed on and we were watching it and just commenting on it, the voices kind of got like really familiar, and then we started looking it up, and oh my god, all these guys are big names. I mean, I'm just touching on some of them. I will not say that all of them are really big names, but most of them are really well-known voice actors, all really accomplished seiyus. So it is something really nice about this whole thing, is that they actually got a voice cast really nice. Not only that, but the few songs that we have here are really, really nice too. And not exactly for my taste, but I think there is value to it. I will talk more about the songs later, but quick back to the main story. So we have the introduction of this group of friends from high school. So Toya is the center, the main character of the story, and then we have Yuki as his girlfriend, and we have all the friends on the side. Then we have the introduction of Yuki's senpai at work, so her senior, let's say, the one who's been doing a bit more time, is Ogatarina, who's, as I already said, voiced by Nana Mizuki. And so she's this top idol kind of deal, who is the star, the ace of Ogata Productions, the business that Yuki and Erina work for, which is directed by Erina's brother, Ogata Eiji. At this point, Ogata Eiji, in this first season, he doesn't actually do much. He has a really long monologue towards the back end of the season that is really full of platitudes and not really makes sense for the most part. And basically, he's a zero entity, let's say. He doesn't actually affect the story for the most part in this first season at the very least. Then, in the midst of it, we have the introduction also of the other one character that I need to actually talk about, who is... also, there are two characters that I need to talk about. We have the introduction of Mana, who is this high school student who's studying towards entering university at this point, and Fuji, because of his really strange condition with his father and having to work in order to keep paying his rent, he becomes the tutor of Mana. So basically that's the connection. And from this point on, Mana wants to, when he meets Fuji and he says that he's actually dating Yuki, as Yuki has at that point become somewhat of a big name, she doubts it, and Mana actually wants to find out, and this goes on to have repercussions towards the back end, where every one of the girls, she thinks it's Yuki, but it's not, and there is a reason why she thinks it's Yuki, and the whole thing kind of works out that way. And then we have the real best girl of this season. And I mean, if you actually intend to watch this and actually work out what I'm saying here, this next girl is the best girl of this whole series. And I know this may be controversial, but Yuki's manager, Yayoi, she's the best girl, okay? She's the best girl. She owns up to being the manager and having that. Much like the producer in Idolmaster, she wants to protect her idol. And even though the methodology is really really questionable. I have to applaud the commitment, and not only that, but the way she does stuff is just top notch for me. It really spices up the whole series in a way that it gets really spicy when she gets onto it. It's really nice. That being said, this is the setup for the beginning of the story, so the whole thing kind of works out that Toya is doing his stuff, and he gets to meet Rina, who is his Oshi, basically, and the whole thing kind of works out from there. So he meeting Rina and Rina meeting him is what sparks, for the most part, most of the whole thing where the stars go, because then Rina having already a different manager that's not Yayoi, because Yayoi is the single manager for Yuki, and so Rina has another one. She fires this one that she has to then hire Fuji as her assistant, let's say, because he does not have the qualifications to be a manager, and from that point on the whole thing kind of goes out the window, because then Fuji begins to actually see Yuki more, and the one thing that actually gets in the way of their love for the most part is that it is well known that idols should not appear to the public as compromised in a relationship way. That is not me saying it, it is like 30 plus years of past experiences with any kind of celebrity. You know, whenever a celebrity announces their marriage or something, it's always weird, right? And for one, this ends up being that Yayoi, as Yuki's manager, she wants Fuji out of the picture and not really messing up with her. And this is when the whole thing kind of comes. I mean, she just don't exactly hit the fan at this point, but let's say that she hits the fan multiple times until the whole thing kind of blows over. So Yayoi wants to actually be the replacement for you, and this is the exact words, okay? She wants to be the replacement for Yuki, and the next thing that happens, you know, it's the thing. And at first, there is resistance. But then time passes, things kind of don't work out that 1 week, there 2 weeks then. And for one single moment, Toya actually accepts the offer, let's say. And then the anime really starts. I'll not talk more about this, because at this point it would be way too much of a spoiler. Easy to say, the whole thing kind of gets really messed up. Later on, we see each of the characters actually with their own struggles, their own desires and wishes, going through their lives, and in this situation, the whole thing is really messy. It's really entertaining, and this is the thing, right? So originally this was not on my radar as an anime to watch, and for the most part it doesn't really fit the theming of actually watching idol anime to actually get music and stuff and normal idol stuff, much like Idol Master and Love Live. But oh my god, this was so refreshing for me to actually watch an equivalent of a soap opera. It was so nice, and in a way I really recommend it. But then we need to get to my opinion, and that's when the thing just gets out of control. So, first thing that we need to actually talk about. This whole thing is originally a visual novel. So, there is this one, let's say, assumption that we have where a visual novel in itself as a medium is not constrained by time, because the player can interact with it at their own leisure and so on and so forth. That being said, the anime does have a time limit. It has to actually have, each episode has effectively 21 minutes of animation, which has to encompass everything, and they only have 26 episodes. There are no OVAs, no extras, or anything of the sort. And so they have to translate a visual novel which has no time limitation into what is equivalent of 26 weeks of work in animation. Again, each episode has to have 21 minutes of effective animation, already excluding the opening and the ending, which are for the most part 1.5 minutes each. Not even talking about the previews for the next episode. So the whole thing is, the one thing that actually came out to me really fast is that this is a story that is limited by its medium, because there are a lot of scenes that happen which don't actually make any sense and really become random stuff that just happens, and somewhat with the hindsight of what you already watched, they affect the story somehow. But those scenes are never really explained. There is one scene towards the back end of the last season that really just clicked to me, like, yeah, I think this is a thing that happens in the visual novel, but they don't actually show in the anime. They don't just show one scene of a girl tearing up some papers. That's the only thing that happens in that one scene. And the same paper appears 2 scenes later, let's say, and you don't actually know what those papers are, but the papers appear somehow. It's really weird. And not only that, but there are some happenings that actually move the story, that come out of nowhere, some context that is not given. So they basically, there are assumptions that the characters make that don't actually appear for us audience, and I think that's lost in the translation of the medium. I choose to think that the source material is better than the anime actually shows. Does it affect the whole thing about the story and the pacing and so on and so forth? I would say it kind of does. The thing that actually comes out to me too, not only about the whole thing about scenes that don't actually appear in the anime, but this anime has a really big problem with pacing. The thing is, there are episodes, there is just hype, just this huge build-up of tension of, oh my god, what will happen with X character, or oh my god, will she discover about Y, or something like that. And this drags on for like a whole lot of episodes, like 4 or 5 episodes. And then there is one episode later where everything hits the fan at the same time. So like they get 7 plot points and hit all the resolutions in the same episode. It becomes really draining when you have to actually keep up with everything happening. Not only that, but the anime itself, as I already said, as they need to actually give so much context to the characters, they need to actually give the characters more development without actually wasting time in animation to give flashbacks and so on and so forth for each of the characters, and they need to actually present everyone. It is really hard and really front-loaded in that sense, where everyone is just talking out of there. It's really weird. The whole thing is front-loaded. They try to give a whole lot of context without actually having the audience actually take time to absorb it, and then they will build up this huge tension to then let it all out in 2 minutes, 5 episodes in. It's really jarring that way. I will say that when some specific stuff hits the fan, I was actually hyperventilating a bit, and easy to say, this was kind of hard to actually finish, because there is one point in the second season when stuff is actually hitting the fan way too hard, and the whole thing kind of begins to crumble, and then you think, oh my god, this is actually going to happen. And for the most part, right, the whole anime is built on that premise. It's built on the premise that Toya is this one guy surrounded by girls, and his girlfriend, the one he chose to be his girlfriend, is... how can I say this without actually being a dick? He has the chance to actually do things outside and nobody knows, and nobody cares. He could also admit to himself that he can't keep up this near long distance relationship, but the whole premise is to see if their love is resilient enough to withstand this kind of stuff. And for the most part, right, they kind of pull it off somewhat. There is one character that is introduced way too late in the first season. I don't actually think her introduction is so late in the visual novel, but here's me talking about something that I didn't play. That she's introduced in a way that she's only the Deus Ex Machina for this whole series. So she comes up as another character. Her introduction is really weird. The whole premise, the whole background on her is really weird until she actually begins to protect Toya from stuff and actually do stuff to just solve a whole lot of plot points they have open. And the whole thing kind of sits weird in my mind because she had the space to actually develop into something, and at the same time she doesn't actually do it. There's one scene where actually I really wanted to see her develop a lot when she actually has the time to, let's say, drink with another character, and I wish that we had that one scene they talking about stuff, because that one scene does not carry so much of a weight if the scene doesn't exist. But the fact that it results in so many plot points being resolved by the next episode, it really sits weird with me that we don't actually have that much development on her specifically, because she actually changes a lot of the running of the story herself, by herself, you know. She alone changes a lot of stuff and actually pushes the story forward in a way that I wish she had more development, because for me she's just this plot device to solve everything. Then we have this one plot point that is kind of alluded to at the beginning, and they just use it to solve another whole issue at the end, which is Toya having some kind of amnesia towards his childhood. And it is kind of jarring because they alluded at the beginning, don't talk much about it like until the end of the first season. Then the second season they alluded to it again, and then they actually mention it in a way that maybe it is going to be resolved, but then they just resolve it in the last episode in a really quick flashback, and the whole thing kind of goes on from there. And this whole thing is to say that this whole anime is a mess for the most part. This whole thing is really weird, and I may be giving it way too much credit for what it is. I will give it that. The animation, I think it is nice enough and at the same time stylized enough to be unique, but also there are some weird frames. The whole thing kind of seems somewhat janky at times, though I would not say the animation's bad. The animation's okay, and I prefer to say that it is a stylistic choice more than an actual failure by the animators. That being said, I could sit here and give a whole lot of weird analysis about the plethora of failures this anime has, but in a way, I just wanted to say this anime is actually pretty great. I'm a bit of a scatterbrain right now saying all of this, because there are so many things that I need to say and so many things that I need to not say to not spoil anything, because for me this anime is nice. This anime has a whole lot of things that I like, and the one major failure that I go back home and say, yeah, this is a great anime, but it is ultimately it fails in one point, is that it has the same problem, and this may be really deep reference. This has the same problem that Kids Never has with me, which is when they reach the climax of the conflict, when everyone is about to hit each other and actually the bloodbath is actually going to start, they cut it off way too early and don't really let it happen, you know. They actually cut it up way too fast, which is such a cock tease, and for the most part it is the major failure of this whole thing. I think they build up the tension really well. They present plot points that are really compelling, some stuff that is really nice, but at the same time, when they need to actually go hard and let the shit actually hit the fan and the whole thing kind of become a bloodbath and people slapping each other, that would be the perfect outcome of this whole thing. Though that is not what happens, and that is the major failure of this whole thing. Not talking about the good things because I don't want to just land this whole thing for 30 more minutes or whatever. Just a bit about the setting before I leave really the thing about the story. This is back again, this is originally a visual novel written in 1998. The story goes through the year of 1985 and 1986, if not 1986 and 87. That is to say, there are no cell phones. One of the biggest setting pieces of this whole thing is landlines, payphones, and answering machines. That is one of the major driving forces of this whole anime, and it is, for one, really well stylized. The whole anime is actually well stylized. There's a point where there is this one studio they go when the guy is listening to a disc on a Shure CD player, and oh man, it's such a nice thing to see. The headphones they use are really one-to-one with the actual thing. So there's one that I actually don't know the model for, unfortunately. I think it's either a Sennheiser or a Bose. I don't actually know. There is one that actually appears in one of the studios. There is AKG K240, and it is on the exact color, the markings, and the whole thing. For some reason, they can't use Sony, but they can use Shure, and this is a bit of the audiophile nerdy stuff on me, but they can use Shure by name, but they can't use Sony by name. I didn't actually understand it, because at one point someone has a cassette Walkman, one of the models of Sony, and it is not really written Sony, it's written Sony, like with an A, and I didn't actually understand why they can use Shure and can use the Sony. I think that's because Sony maybe at that point may be able to sue them, because Sony is originally Japanese, so whatever. The whole thing, right? So the stylized stuff, the setting is really well done. Their whole thing with then listening to stuff. The one thing that actually got me was the K240s with the exact markings. I thought that was genius. I was like, oh my god, this is so 90s. This is way too 90s. There's one of the, so Yayoi as the manager of Yuki, and Yuki herself, Yayoi has this one car from the production company that is imported. I think it's a sedan. At that point, I think coupes didn't exist, so it's a sedan imported. It's actually a big car, and they have installed a cellular phone on the car. And I was like, oh my god, that car may be the most valuable asset of the whole company. Like, what the fuck? Do you know how expensive it was to actually install a phone on your car when we didn't have cell phones? Because there's not one cell phone actually present in the whole of the series. This is a thing, right? So this is a detail that it gets me, okay? It gets me specifically. I don't know if it gets other people, but it gets me. The series it tells a story in the 80s, and they don't actually have cell phones. And one of the main things that happen is that they need a landline to talk to each other. And the whole thing kind of, oh my god. And the whole thing is stylized. The whole thing kind of sits right. And it adds to the setting. It adds to the fact that they are actually professionals. They are running a business. So Ogata Productions have the money because one of their managers has a fucking imported sedan with an installed cell phone on it. Like, come on. That's fucking expensive. And they actually add that to the setting. It is so, oh my god. I don't know if it's just me, but that's a detail that I couldn't let up. It's a detail way too important to not say. And then I have to talk about, I circled around this a bit, but we have the introduction of Mana later. Mana becomes the actual little sister because she's the lolly, and for the most part she looks up to Toya at the beginning as her tutor, even though she doesn't want a tutor. And we can see towards the end that she kind of likes him in a romantic way, but they don't actually. I mean, it was written back in the 90s, so leave it be. But they don't actually give the chance for the lolly to actual romantic interest. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying that it didn't actually happen. And they end up being like this little sister to big brother, somewhat. It is important to say that Toya towards the end of the series is a big ass dick, so I really wish someone at the very least like slapped him a bit more. I think that by the end the amount of punches he has taken and slap he has taken, conversely, from multiple characters was not really the amount that I would have given, because, well, if I talk more about this, it's going to be a spoiler. The thing is, right, so by the end of the day, the best girl is Irina, because I love her design. I love that she's actually a really strong character. She actually is, oh my god, I really love her. I'm sad that I don't know if this is a trend, and I have added this to the bucket list. Try to find an anime where Nana Mizuki's character doesn't actually get the short end of the stick, because much like the last season of Symphony Gear, Rina doesn't actually end up with Toya at the end. This is a major spoiler, I think, but not really. That being said, for me, in my personal bias, I think the one girl that I would say is the best girl is Yayoi, because Yayoi actually owns up to her stuff, and oh my god, it's such it's such a development. It's such a development. It is weird, and some will say that I'm really crazy for saying that she's the best girl, but the fact that she owns up to the stuff she does is such a thing. It just hits the right spot for me. I don't know. The thing is, right, so now talking about songs, and I actually need to talk a bit about it. So for what's worth, this anime has only, I think, 5 insert songs in total, not counting the opening or the ending. So for insert songs, we have Koiro Sora. So it's the I don't know if the translation of this actually works, but then again, it is the love-colored sky, sang by, in this case, Yuki or Hirano Aya. We have Powder Snow, which is a duet of Hirano Aya and Nana Mizuki. We have White Album, which is also Hirano Aya. And then we have the one song that I actually think it's the best song of this whole thing outside of the openings and endings, which is Song of Destiny, sang by Nana Mizuki. It's the one insert song she has solo, and unfortunately I can't actually give let's say official link, because I didn't actually find the official link. The one Song of Destiny that I could find in Spotify or YouTube doesn't actually have the official one. The one I found on Spotify, it is related to White Album 2, which is the sequel for this series that I will most likely be reviewing the next episode. So the whole thing kind of, I don't actually have the link. That's the thing. You need to actually look up Sound of Destiny by Nana Mizuki, as I already said, White Album by Hirano Aya. And then we have the openings and endings, which the openings, for my taste, pretty nice. The second opening specifically, I think was above average. By the side, the openings are sang by Nana Mizuki, the endings are sang by Suara. I don't actually know Suara's work much, but just for feeling and for my taste, the openings are really nice. So the first one is Shin Ai, and the second one is Mugen, both again by Nana Mizuki. The endings, the first one is Mayochiro Yuki no Yoni. I think it is the way the snow falls and melts away. I think that's the translation by Swara, and then Akai Ito, also by Swara. And with that, just a bit of a conclusion, because I actually had to sit down and actually research this whole thing. So first, and I don't actually think I actually need to say this, but there is a bit of a different stylizing from the visual novel to the anime. That's bound to happen because of animation constraints and so on and so forth. But the main thing that actually changed really from the screenshots that are available on Steam is that Rina actually changed from having brown eyes to actually having purple eyes, which I think works a bit better, all things considered. As I said, I love her design, so there's that. And again, just to reiterate, I recommend this anime if you are open to actually being a bit of a mess. So this whole thing is really messed up. It's all over the place with story, pacing, and so on and so forth. But I think that the product is good, and the whole thing kind of works out at the end. It has its moments. It is kind of cute when it's cute. When it needs to be tense, it gets tense. When the characters actually do something bad, it is actually pretty bad, and you feel it. And I think for the most part, this anime is pretty nice. And now this is the major spoiler, okay? I mean, if you know where to look for in what I'm saying, this may be a spoiler. If you're not, then whatever. But in summary, this anime is a combination of the setup from School Days, the ending of Oreimu, but then they actually reveal this is all Nisekoi. This is White Album. And with that, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, please share, please follow, depending on the platform you're in. And I hope you stick around for next time. Bye.